Canada has just signed a $5 billion export deal, completely replacing the United States in Asia's meat market. Meanwhile, hundreds of farms across Iowa, Texas, and Nebraska are being forced to sell off assets, shut down production, or even burn their facilities because there's simply no one left to buy. Every breakfast sandwich you eat, every pack of meat at your local Walmart, all of it is now directly affected by this surprise move from Canada. And America. It's not just losing money, it's losing control over its own dinner table. If you think this is only a farmer's issue, just wait until your local store puts up a sign out of stock. We can no longer source American meat. This didn't start with a meal. It started with a survival war. When Canada announced a $5 billion 5-year export deal with partners across Asia, its meat industry sent a geopolitical shockwave through global trade. The agreement targets East Asian markets, Japan, South Korea, and parts of Southeast Asia that were once strongholds of American meat exports. Canada has pledged to supply millions of tons of premium beef and pork meticulously monitored from farm to table. Its transparent inspection systems, international food safety certifications, and cutting-edge cold chain logistics are exactly why Asian importers are putting their trust in Canadian suppliers, expecting consistent quality and timely delivery. A major reason behind this success lies in Canada's stable import-export policies, free of regulatory whiplash, and reinforced by seamless cooperation between federal and provincial governments. The Canadian government funds cold storage development at ports, subsidizes food safety testing, and flexibly reduces export taxes to help businesses expand. Meat producers are reaping double benefits, turning a profit without worrying about red tape or sudden policy changes. On top of that, Canada's quality guaranteed. Canada Meat Campaign has bolstered the nation's reputation for clean, antibiotic-free products, with many farms now earning sustainability certifications, setting them apart from global competitors. Meanwhile, America's meat industry is facing a painful blow. As of June 2025, U.S. market share in Asia has plummeted, beef exports down roughly 15% year-over-year, pork exports down 20% according to USMEF and USDA data. Long-standing orders are being delayed or canceled outright, with Asian buyers pivoting toward more reliable Canadian alternatives. Some U.S. meat containers are even being rejected at ports, either for failing to meet updated certifications or missing delivery deadlines. Once a symbol of agricultural dominance, mega ranches in Iowa and Nebraska now sit in limbo slaughterhouses running on low-capacity cold storage units, eerily empty. This loss isn't just about missing a shipment, one Iowa farmer said. It's about losing our future. The fallout extends far beyond the farm's jobs, and processing plants, transport, and warehousing are also drying up. Once thriving rural communities are now gripped by financial anxiety, with shrinking incomes and swelling bank debt. To make matters worse, the U.S. is rapidly losing its competitive edge. While Canada proves itself a dependable supplier, America is being seen as inconsistent, its export policies too volatile, its financial support too slow. Aid payments often arrive months late, too late for farms running out of cash to cover feed veterinary care, or rising interest payments on loans. The contrast is even sharper at the government level. Canada is simultaneously advancing free trade agreements with the Philippines and ASEAN nations, strengthening its trade leverage, while the U.S. remains bogged down in internal policy disputes, neglecting long-term agricultural export strategies. The aftermath of March 2025 still lingers. Hundreds of U.S. meat processing plants lost export licenses, cutting them off from Asian markets, a knockout blow to international buyer confidence. Canada isn't just content with making the sale. They're already preparing for the next phase, upgrading cold ports near Montreal, building refrigerated rail lines to cut time from farm to container, securing additional agreements with South Korea and Japan, and elevating brand identity through emotional storytelling. From farm to table, a narrative that resonates deeply with Asian consumers. Meanwhile, American farmers are swimming upstream in a shifting market. They're not just competing for fewer contracts, they're doing it with skyrocketing feed costs due to high corn and soybean prices, and increased borrowing costs tied to rising interest rates. Long-term deals are being replaced by unpredictable low-volume orders, destroying the stability that once defined life for thousands of farm families. Meat industry experts warn that without bold intervention and an overhaul of export support mechanisms, the U.S. could lose its Asian market entirely within a few years. As Canada deepens its roots in Japan and Southeast Asia, America stands to lose more than just meat. it risks forfeiting the agricultural lifeline that generations of citizens once believed would never fail. As beef and chicken prices surge by 15–30% since the beginning of the year, Americans across cities and rural towns are feeling the hit with every grocery run. According to USDA reports, average retail beef prices have climbed 12% since January 2025, while chicken has jumped roughly 18% with no signs of slowing. That kind of increase adds $5 or $8 to the cost of an average meat tray, turning a single dinner into a growing financial concern not just for low-income workers, but even for middle-class families with steady incomes. Reality is shifting on store shelves at Walmart, Kroger, and even small-town groceries. Beef is being replaced with cheaper protein substitutes like tofu eggs or processed chicken products. Data from Consumer Reports shows that households earning under $40,000 annually have cut beef consumption by an average of 20% in just the first 3 months of 2025. Hot meals that once included meat, vegetables, and starch are now reduced to just the basics. And in public schools, especially in Midwestern towns, once reliable free breakfasts featuring toast eggs or milk are losing their protein-rich staples, robbing kids of vital early morning nutrition. The ripple effects go beyond consumers. Meat-focused businesses are scrambling to survive this cost crisis. Chains like Texas Roadhouse and Outback Steakhouse have had to revise their menus, stating that ingredient costs are up 20–25%, forcing them to raise menu prices by $1 to $2 per main dish. Loyal customers now pay more, but these restaurants can't continue absorbing the costs without passing some along, leading to a drop in customer volume and shrinking revenues. Meanwhile, in rural areas like Iowa, Nebraska, and Arkansas, entire meat processing systems from farms to slaughterhouses are shrinking or shutting down. A report from the University of Missouri Extension reveals that more than 18 meat plants in the Midwest have reduced staff by 30–40% or fully shut down in 2025. At least 5 facilities have permanently closed instantly, leaving hundreds jobless. And when a plant shuts down, it's not just workers losing wages. Entire local support industries like transport, cold storage, and logistics are hit hard. Middle-class towns teeter as families face mounting bank loans, growing education expenses, and basic living costs hitting their ceiling. The pain isn't just in numbers. Entire communities are rapidly unraveling. According to a 2025 Rural Community Action Campaign survey, over 30% of small businesses in Midwestern Plains states have either turned down new contracts or closed completely, many having barely recovered from earlier pandemic disruptions. Local schools, corner banks, auto shops, and diners, the backbone of small-town identity, are quietly vanishing. With their farms no longer viable, families are moving to cities for warehouse or labor. Jobs work that's more physically demanding and pays too little to replace the independence they once had from farming. Food assistance groups like Feeding America have reported a 25% surge in those seeking help since 2024, especially in the Southeast and Midwest. Feeding Texas data shows monthly meal distributions have neared 250,000, a figure that never crossed 200,000 before. This is a red flag. As agriculture and export power shrink, the safety net is being stretched thin, and it's being funded by American taxpayer dollars. Losing a job doesn't just mean a missing paycheck, it brings deep long-term consequences. Many families now must sell off assets or land. According to U.S. bankruptcy court data, personal bankruptcies in agricultural counties rose nearly 12% between the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Farm loans are still facing rising interest rates, making it harder for producers to keep up with debt repayment. Local butcher shops, once fixtures of rural America, are also disappearing. National Grocers Association statistics show an 18% decline in independent meat markets over the last 18 months. These shops were more than retail, they were meeting places, community landmarks. Their absence creates silence. Seniors grow lonelier without a daily social stop. Youth lose spaces to learn skills and connect to practical careers. When these businesses vanish, the town doesn't just lose commerce, it loses identity and community cohesion. Zooming out, declining domestic output should ring alarm bells. The USDA reports total beef, pork, and lamb production in Q1 2025 is down 2.5% year over year, continuing a slide from 2024's 1.8% decline. With weakened supply and steady demand, prices continue rising. Meat is becoming a luxury, something families now ration. And the problem isn't isolated, it's pressuring the broader food safety net and healthcare system, because malnutrition is a root cause of chronic illness in children and older adults alike. Educators and local healthcare providers are sounding the alarm. A North Dakota Rural Health Council report found that lack of protein is cutting student performance. Kids in rural districts now score 15% lower than urban peers in physical and cognitive benchmarks. Without a balanced diet, their focus, energy, and brain development suffer, raising the prospect of a future workforce unfit to sustain the very communities that built America's food empire half a century ago. In a country that prides itself on independence and strength, the meat crisis is triggering deep social unraveling. Soaring prices, vanishing jobs, transformed communities, from supermarkets to family farms, from one-room schoolhouses to dinner tables. Every $1 increase in meat costs is more than a number. It's millions of Americans counting every bite, every dollar, and wondering if their dreams of a better life have quietly slipped out of reach. Canada is entering the second phase of its meat export strategy, announcing hundreds of millions of dollars in new investments for port systems, cold storage, and logistics networks. In Montreal and Quebec, Port's newly built refrigerated warehouses were completed in just 6 months and now connect directly to low-temperature rail lines that run to surrounding farms. Not stopping there, the Canadian government has launched a subsidy program enabling businesses to purchase specialized refrigerated containers for faster exports, cutting wait times by 30% compared to last year. As a result, meat is now transported from slaughterhouses to shipping ports and loaded onto vessels within just 48 hours, an unprecedented speed, especially vital for Asian markets demanding freshness and strict quality standards. Meanwhile, the US appears to be losing steam. Many livestock farms in Texas and Oklahoma lie abandoned, their owners unable to sell products or afford operational costs. Domestic supply chains can't fill the gap left by lost exports. Idle cold storage facilities are temporarily shutting down due to lack of use. Without international orders, logistics centers originally built for exports have scaled back operations and lack investment. The damage affects not only farmers, but the efficiency of entire regional agricultural logistics systems that once held dominance. Canada is pushing even further ahead, sealing a new wave of deals with partners in South Korea, the Philippines, and Singapore. One agreement secures 200,000 tons of beef and pork annually for the Philippines. For South Korea, a 3-year deal worth nearly $1 billion has been approved by Parliament. Though smaller, Singapore remains a strategic market due to its high per capita meat consumption. These contracts were negotiated and executed within months, a clear sign that Canada is now backed by expert-level trade diplomacy and legal preparedness that minimizes risks and policy missteps. At the same time, in the US, the signs of stagnation are impossible to ignore. Several American meat processors report they are no longer receiving export orders from Asia, as buyers have switched to Canada's consistent prices and quality. This has left the US supply chain underutilized, monthly export shipments are declining, and some pending contracts are being canceled just before renewal. A logistics director in California confirmed that refrigerated containers headed for Asia were operating at just 60% capacity in Q1 2025, simply because there weren't enough orders to fill the ships. While the US government does offer support programs such as farm funding and logistics development, the aid often arrives too late after ranchers have already liquidated assets or shut down operations. As Canadian provinces pour resources into export infrastructure, the US response appears sluggish. The backbone of US agriculture has not been comprehensively restructured, leaving old supply chains outdated from farms to cold storage, to port terminals, to transport routes and reefer containers. The entire system lacks matching upgrades. As Asian consumers increasingly seek dependable suppliers, Canada is moving fast while the US has yet to show signs of fighting back. Farms that once relied on export contracts now find no relief in a volatile domestic economy. The national supply chain, once seen as a fallback, is itself strained by undercapacity and financial uncertainty. According to the U.S. Meat Export Federation, American meat exports to Asia dropped by at least 25% in 2025, compared to the same period in 2024, a sobering indicator of how far behind the U.S. has fallen in the global meat race. Canada's long-term strategy is also clear. They're targeting upper-middle-income consumers, willing to pay a premium. They promote grade A meat with certifications for safety, no antibiotics, and no growth hormones, credentials that appeal to increasingly health-conscious buyers. They even hold tasting events and farm-to-table showcases to attract upscale shoppers, a level of professionalism and branding the US has yet to match with any cohesive effort. In contrast, US Agricultural support policies remain stuck in limbo. Many farmers are still waiting on promised financial aid access to new technology, cold storage construction grants, and logistics support. But slow approvals and bureaucratic delays have derailed implementation. Some farms that meet eligibility criteria have yet to receive any direct investment to upgrade infrastructure. Meanwhile, operational costs continue rising with feed fuel and loan interest rates spiking after the Fed's 2025 rate hikes. Canada, on the other hand, has launched a trade and legal assistance initiative through its CanExport Agri-Innovation program. This provides financial backing for Canadian companies to attend trade expos, access international marketplaces, and train PR staff, key elements that have embedded Canadian meat brands deeper and more securely into global networks. The results are tangible, not just more deals signed, but a growing global image as a reliable supplier. In this context, America is not just losing market share, it's losing momentum. Major U.S. meat companies say they can't reinvest in processing upgrades or new warehouses due to a sudden lack of capital. So while Canada ramps up with vision and investment, the U.S. is stuck cycling through traditional aid packages, falling dangerously behind in a race defined by speed and quality. The result is that America's domestic livestock industry can no longer mask the weakening of its export agriculture. The slowdown isn't just about losing contracts, it's rooted in outdated infrastructure, sluggish policy execution, and poor adaptability. And this leads to a larger question. If the US doesn't accelerate, now will it still be a serious player in the global meat trade, or will it forfeit its strategic food security leadership altogether? As Americans lose control over their own food supply chain, something that once seemed so simple, the right to eat, is becoming a fragile privilege. Meat, wheat, eggs, and milk are no longer American-made for Americans. Instead, they're slowly being replaced by products from countries with cheaper costs, looser regulations, and far less transparency in quality control. What was once a source of national pride, a U.S. agricultural system that fed both its own people and much of the world, is fading as grocery stores increasingly stock imports due to unstable or uncompetitive domestic supply. According to the USDA, meat imports from Mexico, Brazil, and Australia rose by nearly 17% in just the first quarter of 2025. That number reflects an undeniable truth. When U.S. exports collapsed, farmers went bankrupt and plants shut down, the domestic market could no longer sustain itself. Major retailers like Costco and Kroger have begun negotiating long-term import deals to avoid future shortages. This is no longer a temporary fix. It's a long-term trend in the near future. Americans may be eating meat produced outside of the United States, a reality that just a decade ago would have been unthinkable. But this isn't just a supply and demand issue. The surge in food imports, especially from countries with different safety, environmental, and veterinary standards, brings enormous risks to public health market stability and, most critically, consumer trust. Older Americans, especially those over 50 who grew up trusting the transparency and quality of the Made in America food system, won't easily accept paying for meat from unknown sources raised in questionable conditions they can't verify. There's also the emotional impact. No one wants to eat with doubt in their hearts. Seeing product of foreign country on a pack of meat can feel like a betrayal, as if the system that once promised to serve them has turned its back. A country that once proudly declared itself an agricultural superpower now faces the humiliating reality of relying on imports for basic staples. Not just a supply chain failure, but a blow to national dignity and household confidence. From a national security standpoint, losing food independence leaves the U.S. more vulnerable than ever. Other nations could leverage food as a political tool, or a simple shift in foreign policy could suddenly cut off supply, leaving millions of Americans in crisis. What used to be a worst-case scenario for doomsday planners is now a very real possibility if America can't hold its markets or support its farmers. The day may come when Americans eat meat from countries they don't even know and can't control. Once the U.S. no longer produces enough meat, milk, or eggs to feed its own citizens, every law and social policy becomes irrelevant. How can we talk about sustainable development when even the most basic right to eat safely and fully is no longer guaranteed for 340 million people? The question is no longer should we support agriculture, but rather can America still control what its citizens eat? Without urgent change, the answer may be no. Imagine walking into a grocery store in Ohio, Nevada, or Georgia, and seeing that most of the meat on the shelves comes from South America, Southeast Asia, or even Africa. While this might offer lower prices in the short term, over time, the U.S. will lose its grip on food price and quality standards. and most importantly, its ability to prioritize its own citizens. Meanwhile, American farmers, the very people who once fed the nation, are pushed out of the system they helped build with their blood, sweat, and tears. The worst-case scenario is not just foreign countries supplying meat, but them controlling the entire distribution chain, the ports, logistics hubs, even the trucking companies. Once that happens, Americans will no longer choose what to eat. They'll wait to be told what they're allowed to eat. From a self-sustaining agricultural powerhouse, the US risks becoming food dependent like many struggling nations before it, and that kind of dependency is not easily reversed once normalized. In that grim future, America may be forced to import meat from countries with weak food safety enforcement places, plagued by scandals involving antibiotics, banned additives, and hormone abuse. Picture this one day your child asks, "Why does this meat come from overseas?" And the only answer you have is that the country you were born in, the country you believed in, can no longer feed you. That's no longer just an economic issue. It's a collapse of trust. Food was never supposed to be a political issue until it became a matter of survival, and if Americans no longer control their meals, then no other freedom is truly secure. Voting rights, freedom of speech, property ownership all rest on one essential foundation: the right to eat well, safely, and independently. No policy, no law, no campaign promise will matter if people are forced to borrow money just to buy a tray of foreign meat. That future is not imaginary. It's unfolding shipment by shipment, delay by delay, policy failure by policy failure. And unless we act now, unless we reinvest decisively in American agriculture, the most basic right of all, the right to eat, will slip from American hands. And once we lose that right, we lose everything. So if this trend continues with Canada seizing the market, the US stepping back, and your meals no longer coming from American farmers, can we still say we're truly living on American soil? We can lose our homes, our jobs, even our freedom of movement during hard times. But if we lose control over what we eat, what's left to keep our faith in the future? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe America is standing at a historic crossroads? And do we still have enough time to save domestic agriculture before it's too late? This video does not promote division within the United States or encourage secession. All content is presented for the purpose of exploration analysis and sparking meaningful discussion based on current events, public sentiment, and social trends. We fully respect the US Constitution and all federal laws. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next episode, where we uncover the stories mainstream media often leaves out. The analysis in this video is based on real-time data and independent perspectives. It does not aim to make absolute predictions or cause confusion. We hope this information helps the community reflect and take timely action.